Well, we've received dozens of calls, emails, and messages about the treatment of animals at Puppy Zone on Kingston Pike. This all comes after Misty Lawrence posted this on Facebook about her experience at the store over the weekend. She said that she believed the puppies were drugged and the store smelled of urine and feces. That post of hers has more than 28,000 shares, almost 2,000 comments, and we took the concerns to Knoxville police and the owner of Puppy Zone. Owner Stephen Glatz says employees treat the animals like their own, and he says that they would never do anything to endanger the dogs.
Not tired of people that love animals. Their hearts are in the right place. They just don't know us. If they would have taken 10 minutes to talk to any one of our employees, or myself, they would have left here with a different opinion.
Glatz says that he's always looking to make his store better and is open to suggestions. Knoxville police say that animal control inspects the store twice a month, sometimes more than that. KPD says that officers did an inspection today. They found the dogs were alert and in good health. Coming up tonight at 6, hear from Lawrence about what made her choose to voice her concerns on Facebook.